"Sir, I know how to make your son walk again." The words spoken by a child's voice in a dark alley stopped Daniel Carter in his tracks. Stopped his breath, stopped the endless cycle of weary thoughts he had been carrying for the past 2 years. Daniel looked down at the wheelchair where his son Noah sat motionless, wrapped in a worn-out wool blanket. The boy's messy blonde curls fluttered slightly in the early winter breeze. His eyes were fixed on the cracks in the sidewalk, counting them, or maybe just escaping reality. Daniel couldn't tell. Noah, 11 years old, hadn't taken a single step since the horrific skiing accident in Aspen. A severe spinal fracture. A cold clinical verdict from the doctors. Permanent damage. No recovery. Daniel had once been a titan in Chicago's finance world. An architect of urban dreams, transforming crumbling neighborhoods into high-end real estate gold mines. A man who had believed that money and power could buy anything. Anything. Except the small, broken legs of his own son. The girl's voice came again, soft but sure. "Sir, I can help your son." Daniel spun around. It wasn't some street hustler or scam artist. It was just a little girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, skinny, inside an old hoodie with a torn shoulder, dusty jeans, and sneakers patched up with silver duct tape. What made Daniel hesitate wasn't her pitiful appearance. It was her eyes. Eyes far older than her years, steady, deep, unnervingly calm. "My name is Amira," the girl said, clutching the hem of her hoodie. "I stay at the old church on Franklin Street. Yesterday, I saw you and your boy. I saw him sad. Like I used to be." Noah looked up the first time in days he showed any reaction. The boy stared at Amira as if a dying man had just seen the first drop of rain. Daniel frowned. "You think you can do what the top hospitals in the country couldn't?" His voice was sharper than he intended, the frustration of a father trapped between hope and despair. Amira didn't flinch. "There are things doctors can't heal," she said quietly. "But the heart can, Dad." Noah's voice was barely a whisper. "Let's try." Daniel froze. Noah, the boy who hadn't asked for anything in 18 long months, was now pleading to follow a homeless little girl clinging to a threadbare shred of hope. Daniel gripped the wheelchair handles tightly, heart heavy. "If anything feels wrong, we leave immediately. Deal?" Noah nodded, a faint smile flickering across his pale face. "Come with me," Amira said, turning and leading the way. Daniel pushed the wheelchair forward, each step heavier than the last. They moved through streets Daniel himself had once ordered to be redeveloped. Now, under the cold yellow streetlights, the empty alleys seemed to swallow him whole. Every pothole, every cracked brick struck Daniel with the same question. "What am I doing?" But then he looked at Noah. The boy's eyes, there was a spark, there faint but alive enough to pull Daniel forward. Finally, they stopped in front of a rotting wooden door hidden under layers of tangled vines. Amira knocked 3 times. The door creaked open on its own, revealing a dimly lit room, shafts of light breaking through the holes in the roof. In the center of the room, sitting cross-legged on a faded rug, was an elderly woman. Skin dark and wrinkled hair, snow white and coiled neatly atop her head. Before Daniel could speak, the woman spoke first, her voice deep and warm like a flowing river. "I knew you would come. With a pain you don't yet know how to name." Daniel instinctively tightened his grip on the wheelchair, ready to pull Noah away. But Noah's small hand rested on his arm, a silent plea. "Stay." The old woman opened her eyes so deep they seemed to hold the whole night sky. "Let me touch your son's knees," she said softly. Daniel hesitated. But Noah's pleading gaze, so fragile, so desperately hopeful, made him nod. Amira sat down quietly by the rug hands, clasped silently watching. The old woman placed her rough, calloused hands gently on Noah's knees. A soft hum filled the room, like wind threading through ancient trees, like a lullaby from a world long gone. Noah shuddered. His eyes flew open. I feel something, Noah whispered. Like electricity, but soft. Daniel leaned in, heart pounding. What do you feel? The old woman smiled. The body never forgets, she said. It just needs the heart to remember. Noah sat frozen, his breathing quick and shallow. He looked at the old woman, then at his father. Light from the broken roof spilled down, casting a fragile halo around the wheelchair. Would you like to try standing up? The old woman asked, her voice soft, almost like an invitation. Noah swallowed hard, gripping the sides of the wheelchair. He looked at Daniel, seeking permission. Daniel crouched down, placed a hand on his son's shoulder, and gave him an encouraging nod, even though fear churned deep in his own chest. I'm ready, Noah whispered. The old woman gave a slight nod. Gently, she wrapped her hands around Noah's elbows and signaled for Daniel to let go. The room fell utterly silent. It felt as if the whole world was holding its breath. Noah tensed his body. His frail legs, long forgotten under the dust of countless failed therapy sessions, trembled. And then one step, left foot. Daniel stopped breathing. Another step. Right foot. It was only a small movement, as fragile as a thread, but it was a first step. After 18 endless months, I'm standing. Noah gasped, his eyes wide with astonishment. Daniel collapsed onto the floor, silent tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by a tidal wave of emotions. His hand trembled as he reached out, but he didn't dare interrupt the sacred moment. Noah managed to stand for about 5 seconds before his little legs wobbled. Daniel lunged forward and caught him, pulling his son into a tight embrace. You did it, Noah, he whispered hoarsely. You really did it. Noah buried his face into his father's shoulder, sobbing. Not from pain, but from the pure, overwhelming feeling of being free from the prison of his own body for the first time in so long. Amira stood nearby, clutching the hem of her hoodie, her lips pressed tightly together. No celebration, no boasting. Just quiet joy, as if she had always known the miracle would come. The old woman took a step back, her hands folded gently at her chest. She said nothing more, only smiled a smile that held a whole sky's worth of love and patience. Daniel lifted his gaze to the old woman. I don't understand, he stammered. This shouldn't be possible. The old woman simply looked at him, her gaze deep enough to hold 1,000 answers without uttering a single word. Not everything in life needs explaining, she said slowly. Some miracles only require a heart brave enough to believe. Daniel felt the walls of logic, science, and doubt, the very things that had once made him a legend in business, crumble inside him. All the rules he had lived by seemed so small now before this simple miracle. Noah clutched his father's arm, his face alight. I can feel my legs. Dad, he choked out. I can really feel them. Daniel hugged him even tighter, unable to find words. His whole body shook, but not from fear. From the overwhelming realization that from this moment forward, everything had changed forever. Amira stepped closer, kneeling beside Noah. You did it, she said softly. Just like I once did? Noah looked at her, curiosity lighting up his face. Daniel lifted his gaze too for the first time, truly seeing the girl not with his eyes, but with his heart. You couldn't walk once, Noah asked. Amira nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. I was born with a twisted foot, she said quietly, her voice barely louder than a whisper. Everyone thought I'd never run or jump like other kids. But my grandmother, she refused to believe that. Light slanted through the cracked window, painting the silhouettes of 3 souls. A boy who had once lost hope. A man who had once believed money could buy miracles. And a homeless girl whose heart was bigger than the city itself. Daniel sat there listening, and for the first time in his life, he realized some miracles didn't need doctors or scientists' money or prestige. Sometimes they simply needed a child brave enough to believe. Amira gently clasped her small hands together. My grandma, she began her gaze drifting toward a faraway past. She believed in things no one else believed in anymore. Daniel and Noah listened in silence, drawn into every whispered word. When I was little, Amira said, every time my foot hurt so much I couldn't stand, she would just sit beside me. She wouldn't say anything. She wouldn't push me. She would just hold my hand and sing an old song I never understood the words to. Noah tilted his head, like the song the old lady sang earlier. Amira gave a bittersweet smile. Yes, that same one. Daniel felt his heart tighten. In a world that was noisy, rushed, where every solution was money or machines, there was someone who simply chose to sit beside a child. Just that, to stay, to believe, and to wait. And then one day Amira continued. Grandma said to me, if you want to try to stand, you don't have to force it. You don't have to be afraid. Just try it. And I stood up. Her voice grew so soft, it nearly dissolved into the sunlight, filtering through the broken roof. And from that day on, she said, I never stayed sitting forever again. Noah gripped Amira's hand tightly, his eyes shining. Daniel swallowed hard. He had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on therapies, machines, medicines. But maybe what Noah needed most was someone who would simply sit beside him. Someone who would believe he wasn't broken, he wasn't lost. Someone to remind him. Daniel turned to the old woman, his voice raspy. Where did you learn this? The old woman smiled kindly and shook her head. I didn't learn it, sir, she said softly. When you love someone deeply enough, you hear the things their heart can't say. Daniel felt the world slow down around him. He looked at Amira, the little girl in a torn hoodie shoes, held together with duct tape, her gaze unwaveringly steady. A girl who should have been the one needing saving. Yet today, she had saved his son. Outside, the autumn wind stirred swirling dry golden leaves across the cracked courtyard. The sky was gray, but inside this crumbling room, a light had ignited a light Daniel had thought gone forever. You're still here? Daniel asked Amira, his voice trembling. You don't have any other family. Amira nodded. I stay because there are people who need me. Her answer was simple without sadness. Just a truth accepted without bitterness. Daniel looked down at Amira's small hands, roughened by the cold, by days spent wandering city streets. And he understood. Even with millions in his bank account, he had never been as strong as this little girl. You shouldn't have to live like this, Daniel said quietly. You deserve a home, a safe place, a chance. Amira just smiled. I already have everything, she said. I have Grandma. I have the song. And I have people like you and Noah reminding me that miracles still exist. Daniel fell silent. This little girl didn't need saving. She was the miracle. The old woman gently patted Daniel's shoulder like a loving mother comforting a wayward son. You forgot that, she whispered, in the race you were running. But today you found it again in the trembling smile of your son. Daniel closed his eyes, letting her words sink into his soul. When he opened them, he saw Noah had left his wheelchair, clutching Amira's shoulder, taking slow, wobbly but determined steps around the battered old room. Daniel broke down in tears. For the first time in years, not from failure, but from hope. That night, Daniel Hayes sat alone in his lavish penthouse, gazing out over the shimmering lights of Chicago spread like an ocean of stars beneath his feet. There were no more sounds of wheelchair wheels scraping across hardwood floors. No more signs of a child weighed down by despair. Only the softest sounds, real steady footsteps echoing from Noah's room. Daniel had never felt smaller in his life. Everything he had built, skyscrapers, billion-dollar developments, dazzling contracts. Not one of them could buy the moment his son placed his bare feet on the floor for the first time. And yet a little street girl with torn shoes, an old song, and an indomitable heart had made it happen. He sat motionless, turning the business card he had given Amira over and over in his hands. She hadn't called, and maybe she never would. Amira didn't need a mansion. She didn't need cars, credit cards, or lavish parties. What she needed was meaning. And somehow, in this vast city, that little girl had found what so many adults, including himself, were still desperately searching for. Suddenly, Daniel jumped to his feet. He couldn't just sit still. He pulled out his phone, scrolling past the names of CEOs, lawyers, and business partners. This time, looking for old, almost forgotten contacts. Homeless shelters, youth centers, community churches, free clinics. He had to find her. For days afterward, Daniel wandered through the forgotten corners of the city, places he had only seen through limousine windows, never stepped foot in. Alleys that reeked of garbage and old rain. Abandoned buildings, soup kitchens. Eyes filled with fear and desperation peeked out from beneath threadbare coats. At a shelter on Ashland Avenue, an elderly woman, her back curved like a gnarled tree, looked at him with a mix of sympathy and suspicion. "You're looking for Amira?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "She stops by now," and then the woman said, "Stays a few nights, then disappears like the wind. She doesn't belong to any one place, but everywhere she goes, someone gets healed." Daniel thanked her, left his number, and continued his aimless search. Days passed. No news. Daniel began to wonder if he should give up. Then one late afternoon, under a heavy gray rain, he saw her. Amira was sitting by the curb on Roosevelt Street, cradling a frail little boy in her arms, his face pale with pain. No ambulance. No doctors. No adults are willing to stop. Only Amira with her entire small heart wrapped around this child. Daniel slammed the brakes, sprinted toward them. "Amira," he called out, voice catching with emotion. She looked up surprised, then smiled gently. "You found me," she said. The boy in her arms. Jaden had dislocated his shoulder after falling from a dumpster while searching for food. Daniel knelt beside them, pulling a towel from his car to gently wipe the dried blood from the boy's arm. "Let me help," he said softly. Amira studied him, her gaze wise beyond her years. "If you want to help," she said quietly. "Don't just help us. Help all the kids like us." Daniel swallowed hard. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside were a debit card and a key to a small apartment on Chicago's North Side. No speeches. No conditions. Just an opportunity if she ever wanted it. Amira accepted it, not greedily, not with obvious gratitude. Just simply like someone accepting a seed, knowing it needed to be planted in the right soil. "Thank you," she whispered. No promises to use it. No promises to change. Just the knowledge that if she ever needed it, she would no longer be completely alone. Daniel watched as she helped Jaden to his feet, and for the first time, he truly understood. Some people are meant simply to exist, not to rescue, not to reform, but to remind the world hope still exists. After that encounter, Daniel Hayes felt like a man waking from a long dream. Every morning when Noah clung to the rail during physical therapy, his trembling legs struggling to reclaim lost freedom, Daniel no longer just sat and watched. He trained alongside his son, through painful falls, silent tears, and the soft laughter that came when Noah stood 1 second longer than the day before. These small battles, the ones Daniel once thought beneath him, now meant everything. Instead of pouring money into extravagant developments, Daniel quietly began funding shelters and youth support centers, places like the ones Amira once called home. No banners, no press conferences, Just thick envelopes sent with a simple handwritten note. For children like Amira, so they don't have to grow up in the dark. Every night before bed, Noah would ask, "Dad, did you find Amira today?" Daniel would only smile, squeezing his son's small hand. Yes, he was searching, not just for her by name or address, but for the miracle she had awakened in his heart. Faith, presence, the courage to love without conditions. That winter, Chicago froze so harshly that the edges of Lake Michigan turned into solid sheets of white. But inside the small Hayes apartment, the light poured in through the windows, filling every afternoon with golden warmth. Noah could now walk from his bed to the balcony, slowly, carefully, but sturdily, like a little warrior. Then, one late afternoon, Daniel received a phone call from a relief station on Wells Street. "Mr. Hayes, we found something. We think it's for you." It was a handwritten letter, unsigned, scribbled across an old, crinkled piece of paper. "Don't look for me. I'm not a miracle. I'm just a child who was loved enough to believe that small miracles still exist. Thank you for believing." Daniel clutched the letter tightly. He didn't cry. He didn't laugh. He simply felt warmth spreading through him, melting the thin layer of ice that had encased his heart. Amira was gone. No trail left behind. No need for recognition. But her presence, quiet, patient, unyielding, had planted something far more beautiful than any skyscraper Daniel had ever built. Noah grew stronger every day. The boy began running short distances in the nearby park under the astonished eyes of those who knew the Hayes family's story. Doctors, therapists, they all shook their heads, unable to offer a scientific explanation. A miracle, they whispered among themselves. An unexplainable miracle. But Daniel knew that miracle had a name, and her name was Amira. Once, while father and son rested under the shade of an old oak tree, Noah asked, "Dad, why isn't Amira with us?" Daniel ran his hand through Noah's hair, voice soft and steady. "Because people like Amira don't stay in one place, son. They are light, and light doesn't sit still. Light moves toward where it's needed most." Noah pondered this for a long moment, then smiled a smile that seemed to understand something far greater than his 11 tender years. And so every time Noah saw a homeless person, a child huddled in a street corner, he would stop. A handshake, a warm sandwich, a hug, because he believed somewhere another Amira might be waiting for someone to believe in her, just like he once had. Daniel Hayes, the once untouchable real estate tycoon, drowned in numbers and profits, now spent his weekday mornings volunteering across Chicago. No one recognized him in his worn-out jacket and scuffed shoes. And he didn't need them to, because he had found himself again, in Noah's peals of laughter, in the grateful glances of strangers, in the forgotten alleys where hope had once flickered, and now, thanks to one little girl, burned brightly once more. That spring, Chicago slowly awakened from a winter that had lasted longer than usual. Tiny buds began to sprout from cracks in the sidewalks. The trees lining the river unfurled a soft, tender green, like the whispered promises of life. And Daniel Hayes, a man who once believed he had seen the very limits of miracles, was about to receive a gift he never expected. One Saturday morning, while walking their newly adopted puppy with Noah through the park, Daniel's phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Mr. Hayes." A woman's voice, polite but tinged with nervous excitement. "This is Linda, director of Youth Haven Center in South Side. There's something I think you should know." Daniel listened silently. "A little girl left something here for you. She didn't want to meet in person, but we believe you deserve to have it." Daniel's heart clenched. "Amira, I'll be there right away," he replied without hesitation. Youth Haven sat tucked into a rundown neighborhood where graffiti blanketed the old brown brick walls. Inside, the space radiated warmth. Shelves crammed with old books, children's drawings covering the walls, and bright ringing laughter filling the air. Linda, a silver-haired woman in a simple green sweater, came out to greet him. "She didn't leave a name," she said with a smile, "but I think you'll know who it's from." She handed Daniel a small box simply wrapped in brown paper and tied with a thin piece of twine. Daniel opened it. Inside, resting on a soft cloth, was a bracelet. Simple, rough, braided from old faded threads. On its face, stitched carefully in silver thread, were 3 tiny words: "Hope never leaves." Tucked beside it was a folded piece of paper, written in the familiar slanted handwriting. "I can't stay, but I know you'll keep going. I believe in that. Thank you for believing in miracles even when everyone else gave up. A girl from Wells Street." Daniel clutched the box tightly. His eyes burned, not from loss, not from regret, but because Amira was still there. In every step he took, in every new breath Noah drew, in every child's laughter he encountered each day. Linda gently touched his shoulder. "She doesn't need to be found," she said softly. "She needs to be trusted. To know that somewhere there are grown-ups who won't forget her even if she's not nearby." Daniel nodded, gripping the bracelet in his palm. On the drive home, he slowed down through the old streets. He saw children playing under the bright sun, families selling fruit from sidewalk stands, and elderly couples knitting quietly on their porches. And in every corner, it seemed he could almost hear faint singing, the soft rhythm of small footsteps, and glimpse a fleeting shadow in a worn-out hoodie. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Daniel stood quietly on the balcony. The city stretched out before him, sparkling with warm golden lights, like stars scattered across the earth. He slipped the thread bracelet onto his wrist, loose, humble, yet more precious than any piece of jewelry he'd ever owned. Hope never leaves. Hope never disappears. It only waits patiently until someone kind enough notices it again. And Daniel Hayes, who once believed he had built an empire from steel and concrete, finally understood. The greatest empire isn't built with money. It's built with faith, with love, and with the courage to listen to the quietest of miracles. 2 months later, Chicago awoke under the dazzling light of early summer, the streets pulsing with new life. In a small community sports center in the West Loop, the sound of sneakers pounding against the gym floor echoed off the walls. Noah Hayes, now 11 years old, stood at center court gripping a basketball tightly. He trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. In the stands, Daniel sat among a sea of cheering parents clutching the railing eyes locked onto his son. The coach blew the whistle. "Come on, Noah. Drive it in. Believe in yourself." Noah bent his knees, those same legs once declared useless, and jumped, executing a perfect layup. The ball bounced softly off the backboard and dropped neatly into the net. Cheers erupted through the stands. Daniel shot to his feet, overcome with emotion. When Noah ran toward him, hair soaked with sweat but eyes shining brightly, Daniel pulled him into a tight hug. "I did it, Dad!" Noah gasped, grinning from ear to ear. "I really did it." Daniel nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I never doubted it, Noah. Not for a second." After the game, as the two of them walked their bikes out to the parking lot, Daniel noticed an elderly woman standing nearby. She wore a long brown coat, her silver hair neatly tied back, and clutched a small worn fabric bag. She smiled warmly when she saw Noah. "That boy has come much farther than anyone could have imagined," she said, her voice low and soothing. Daniel squinted. There was something familiar about her, not her face, but the feeling. A sense of peace, like sunlight breaking through after a long storm. "You know us?" Daniel asked cautiously. The woman just smiled without answering directly. She reached into her bag and handed Noah a small envelope. "Someone asked me to give this to you," she said. Noah tore it open. Inside was an old hand-drawn postcard, a sketch of a girl in a hoodie standing beneath a sky full of stars. At the bottom, there was a simple line of handwriting. "Always keep walking. When you need me, I'll be closer than you think." No signature. No return address. Just that. Noah looked up, about to ask something, but the woman had already disappeared, her figure melting into the bustling crowd of the city. Daniel and Noah stood there, surrounded by the dazzling sunlight and the city's clamor, feeling an invisible thread gently tighten around their hearts. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Daniel sat out on the balcony, the postcard lying on the table before him. He turned it over and over in his hands, tracing the crooked but loving lines. He knew. No more questions needed. No more searching. Amira had never disappeared. She had simply stepped back, letting those she touched find their own strength to walk forward. Across the city, in a makeshift medical tent set up for homeless children, a small girl in a worn-out hoodie sat beside a young boy crying over a scraped knee. Amira, now living under a new name, a new life, gently placed her hand on the boy's shoulder and smiled. No words were needed, just a gaze full of trust. Just a silent presence, because she knew. Miracles don't lie in grand gestures. They live in the moments when someone stays, when someone believes enough not to let go. And somewhere in this sleepless city, that quiet beating heart continued to shine on. That autumn, Chicago wrapped itself in a new coat, fiery red leaves like little flames scattered across the sidewalks, and the breeze carried whispers of old memories. On a quiet street corner outside the community library for underprivileged children, a new sign was hung. Amira's Corner, a place for unyielding hearts. No one knew exactly who had sponsored this cozy little space. All they knew was that a few weeks prior, an anonymous donation had arrived enough to fully cover the center's first year of operations. Inside the library, Noah Hayes, now a healthy, lively boy with no need for crutches, was stacking books onto shelves. Pinned to his chest was a small badge, a hand-drawn star identical to the one on the card Amira had once left behind. Daniel Hayes leaned against the worn wooden doorway, quietly watching his son. There were moments when he wondered if everything that had happened was merely a fleeting miracle or the beginning of something far greater. Every time he saw Noah walk strong, confident, he knew the answer. Amira hadn't just healed a pair of legs. She had rekindled belief. She had pieced together shattered dreams. That night, as the city disappeared beneath a blanket of darkness, Daniel sat by the window of their apartment, thumbing through a worn envelope, the one that held Amira's old card. On the back, something he had never noticed before caught his eye. A tiny, almost invisible line written in faint pencil. "If ever you forget how strong you are, find the ones the world deems the smallest. There you will remember just how big you truly are." Somewhere else, under the dim glow of a street lamp, a small girl in a frayed hoodie held the hand of a newly arrived immigrant boy, lost and overwhelmed by the city. No one asked her name. No one knew who she was. They only knew that wherever despair lingered, the shadow of Amira, or those she had inspired, was never far behind, patiently sitting beside silent pain, humming songs without words. Finally, Daniel understood. Amira was never a miracle meant to be kept. She was a flame meant to be passed on. And each soul she had touched would eventually become another candle lighting up the darkness. The story's end. A year later, at his elementary school graduation, Noah Hayes received a special award, Most Inspirational Student of the Year. When he stepped onto the stage, he didn't talk about his own struggles. Instead, he held up the old, carefully laminated card and whispered into the microphone. Sometimes all it takes to stand up is someone who believes you can. Somewhere tucked within the narrow alleys of Chicago, a silent song rose once more, steady and strong, like the beating heart of the city itself. and the hearts that had once faltered, once nearly given up, now knew. There would always be someone closer than they had ever imagined. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Who knows, at some moment, you might become the guiding light for someone who's lost out there. Believe this. Sometimes the smallest acts are the greatest miracles.